fork, dough, water. Okay, I think we're ready to go. It seems with the quarantine, there seems to be a phenomenon occurring, and I'm calling it a phenomenon only because I don't think this would have really happened if the quarantine wasn't in place or the lockdown in place, and that's baking. Everybody's baking right now. Supplies are starting to come around. I mean, we're looking at, what's the date today? April 14th. So supplies are becoming a little more available, but for 2 or 3 weeks there was no all-purpose flour, there was no dry yeast. A lot of other ingredients were getting sold out for people who want to try gluten-free baking, like sweet white rice and buckwheat and all those things, which I'm finding pretty hilarious because I like to bake off and on my own anyways, and it didn't dawn on me. There's a craze going on right now, making sourdough bread from scratch, making your own wild yeast, and I didn't jump on this bandwagon. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while anyways, but I just find it hilarious when I started to actually take part in this. YouTube is going nuts right now with all these videos. I mean, I'm obviously creating a video myself right now too. But YouTube is going nuts right now with all these sourdough starter clips that are going around, and I have been learning a great deal, but I've decided to take part in a Toronto Sourdough Workshop. I'll provide the info here. And I really like how he's taking his approach. He's obviously been doing it for a while. His name is Desh. And thank you so much for providing your knowledge in how to make wild yeast and how to eventually make sourdough bread. So he has provided instructions, and I'm actually going to do this video based off the fact that I haven't actually made wild yeast before. Confession, when I first started taking the workshop, I didn't have any wheat flour. I actually had bleached all-purpose flour, which I didn't realize was not the flour to use, but that's just what we have, because in Canada and I think in the States is the more common type of flour, which is the enriched or bleached all-purpose flour. So I didn't have any actual unbleached wheat flour. So I made a gluten-free version because I do more gluten-free baking, but I like sourdough with regular wheat flour. I find it digests. The reason I do more gluten-free baking in terms of pastries and sweets, it's I seem to have some sort of either a sensitivity or intolerance. It doesn't digest very happily, and I swell up. I tend to retain water, so. But with sourdough, I find that I actually can digest it very, very happily. Glad about that. Anyways, this poor guy needs to be fed. But I ended up finding a site called Vanilla and Bean, and she actually does a gluten-free version sourdough starter, and I have the gluten-free ingredients, which is buckwheat, sweet white rice, and just water. So I decided to make that. It's just I am now introducing wheat flour to it, so it's already become yeast. It's already become yeast, and I've just added some wheat flour to it, and now it's just going nuts, and I really do need to feed it soon. I think after this I have to go. Anyways, but I wanted to now start an actual wheat sourdough starter the way Desh has been teaching us, and I wanted to share that experience with you. I might even do a time lapse to see how it's working, because the first day one, when you do it, has to be 24 hours before you go and refresh it or feed your sourdough starter. Hasn't become yeast yet, so we're gonna work towards it. I don't know if the time lapse is gonna show anything, but I kind of want to share it if there is anything interesting, and it's just more for my personal thing because I am a geek at heart and I want to see what's going on. It's supposed to bubble, it's supposed to burp, it's supposed to fart, it's supposed to do a whole bunch of things. I want to see the level of rise. So we'll just see how that goes. Now his instructions read, a jar can be a plastic or glass, and I have that. It's about this one. It's about 500 ml jar. A metal fork. 1 teaspoon. I actually grabbed a tablespoon. Boo-boo. About 100 grams of flour. I have already measured this out. We do actually have a digital scale, which I highly recommend. So I have 100 grams of flour, 70 grams of water, which again, I've already measured out. This is about 77 grams. I didn't feel like pouring it out and remeasuring it. We won't be using the whole thing because it's more about feel and the way it looks. Elastic band to see where your measurement is before it rises. More of a visual thing. Weighing scale I already did. I have a digital scale and I've already pre-measured everything for the purpose of this video. Okay, so what I like about his approach, a lot of the videos are exact measurements, either 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or 1-to-3, wherever you want to go. Why I like his style more is because it's kind of the way that I cook. It's more based on intuition and learning to feel and see, more visual, learning to smell, using all of your existing senses and using those or applying those to see where the starter is and how it's looking. He did also mention our starter. I have thought of a name. I will share it near the end of the video once we make the starter. So first we're going to use the flour and the water in conjunction, and we're going to add the water a little bit at a time. We're not going to add it all in because what he says is that it should be not very watery, it should not be dry, it should be the way I describe it is gloopy and lumpy, and you will see what I mean by gloopy and lumpy. But you know, when you mix it and when you pull your spoon or fork out, it shouldn't quite fall off the fork or spoon like watery, liquidy substance. It should be a little bit thick, almost, I guess, thicker than a pancake batter, but let's just see and try this out. Okay, so we are gonna first add the flour. This is all of the 100 grams of flour that I'm adding in. And I am actually using whole wheat ground flour, unbleached. I don't know if there is such a thing as bleached whole wheat flour, but I'm gonna go with that. And the reason I'm also starting with whole wheat, one, it was at Desh's recommendation because I did tell him that I have a bit of a gluten sensitivity. And he said, try whole wheat and eventually spelt and mixing that. I did purchase some regular unbleached wheat flour as well because I'd like to see, you know, what I can handle, what I can. And now we're gonna start incorporating the water. Again, we're not gonna add the whole thing in at once. We're just gonna add maybe half of it in, mix it, and see how it's looking. Now, my starter is still looking very thick. I have actually added all of the water that I have, and I did bring extra just in case. So we're gonna we're actually in fear of adding too much water, which this may cause a slower rise, but I think I'm gonna leave it at this because this is pretty much how I recall the first time when we were making the starter with Desh through Zoom. We did not meet in person. We're adhering to the quarantine laws. This looks about right. So it will eventually become soupier on its soupier. No one is here. No one can correct me. Soupier consistency later on. So I'm gonna show it on the big camera. You can see it's gloopy and lumpy. That's why I called it gloopy and lumpy. Yeah. Okay. We are just gonna wipe down the sides with the fork so it's somewhat clean. Clean-ish. It's more not just to maintain cleanliness and some, you know, if weird thoughts of hygiene going into the jar. It's more for visual reference so you can see how it's been rising. Okay. That's done. Now, the purpose of the rubber band is to give you a visual reference of how much you've mixed and how much it's risen from there. So what we're going to do is, I really liked the color red. Somewhat there. All right, we have our starter. Smells like dough. It's got the rubber band on it, so it's good to go. And make sure the lid is one of these kinds or just a lid. Basically what you want to do is make sure that it's sitting there loosely, like this. I'll show it on the other camera. So lid. There we go. And the reason you want to do that is because some people described it as a little sourdough bomb. So sourdough starter bomb, because it will grow. And if you don't give it space for it to expand, if you have a closed, tight lid, it will then actually explode the jar. But we don't have to worry about that. That's, you know, if you add way too much starter to begin with, that doesn't fit and give room for the expansion. Just make sure it's it's a loosely placed lid on top so that if it does go beyond the size of the jar, it has room to go up. And that leads to me naming the starter. Desh suggested that we actually name it. And because of its behavior, I am going to call it my Tamagotchi. And if anybody remembers what Tamagotchi is, it's from my time. I'm just giving out my age now. And I'm pretty sure the young folks still know what a Tamagotchi is. It was a little electronic thing about this big. It was like a keychain size. You would actually hook it up to your keychain. And this little tiny, it was like a 8-bit computer, it just dots everywhere, and this little thing showed up. You had to feed it, you had to nurture it, you had to care for it, you had to give it attention to have this thing come out of a virtual egg and grow into this virtual being called Tamagotchi, and it actually responded to all of your care that you were providing for it. So this is my Tamagotchi. It's my version of a Tamagotchi, and we'll see how this thing goes. And so we'll see how this burps and farts and does all those movements and goes up and start creating that elasticity in there, and eventually we'll make a sourdough starter. The first day is a 24-hour resting period where you let it sit. So right now it's 11 a.m. So tomorrow I'm going to check it at 11 a.m. I may even check it beforehand and see how it looks. After when it's done, when I'm done vlogging all of this, I would suggest you put it near your stove because the heat will help the starter become even more active. So stay tuned and we'll see how this goes. Thanks. Oh, you will find Desh's information down below. He is providing workshops to make sourdough bread, and I highly recommend it because I think sourdough bread is one of those where you kind of want some assistance. You can try from scratch on your own, but I think with someone's assistance, you can feel less disappointed because there will be disappointing periods while making sourdough bread. I've heard pros even say, you know, they still have some bad days with sourdough, and that depends on the environment. There's so many factors and variables at play. So going to a workshop like this, at least, you know, with the help of a professional who makes sourdough for a living, you can at least gain an understanding of, you know, things happen and why don't we try again, or why don't we try it this way? And I think that's really, really useful so that it gives you an ease of mind if something goes bad. And if it goes really well, at least you have someone there to point out saying, you know what, it looks really good. This is the way it should be going. Give it a taste and give it a go. So I highly recommend it. This is not a paid promo, but I just really want to share, you know, what he's doing because I think he's doing a great thing. So let's wait till the next video. All right.